Chapter 441. Counterattack begins. Black Azura and the Dark Knight tribe members were currently positioned in the rear, waiting for Yi Li's signal. He intended to set a trap for the Dark Race members and zombies, and take them all by surprise. Bai Yuan stared at Yi Li with anger in his eyes, not having felt this furious in a long time. Human, today it's either your death or mine. Swish. With a wind-breaking sound, Bai Yuan vanished from his original spot. Bai Yuan was indeed incredibly fast, something that Yi Li had to acknowledge. If it weren't for his heavenly spirit eyes, he might not have been able to keep up with Bai Yuan's speed. However, the world had always been unfair. Since Bai Yuan wanted to confront him head-on, Yi Li was willing to oblige. Swish. Another wind-breaking sound, and Yi Li left only an afterimage in his previous location. Clang. The sound of weapons clashing suddenly filled the dim sky with glimmers of frosty light. But how could the dark ancient spear compare to the dragon-slaying blade? In a single strike, the dark ancient spear was reduced to powder. What? Bai Yuan's pupils constricted as he couldn't believe his dark ancient spear had been turned into dust with a single blow. He wanted to retreat several hundred meters, but Yi Li wouldn't give him the chance. Bai Yuan was very fast, really fast. But Yi Li's swift steps were even faster. Swish. Yi Li slashed at Bai Yuan's back. How to describe this strike? It was indescribable. But one thing was certain. After this attack, Bai Yuan would disappear forever from this world. Silence, a deadly silence. Yi Li remained airborne, holding the sword, standing tall, and giving off an imposing presence. He seemed like a god descending from the heavens, a celestial being in the mortal world. Seeing Bai Yuan's death, the Dark Race members no longer dared to continue fighting and frantically retreated. Upon witnessing this, Xiao Tsang and Tang Xiao shouted, "Chase them!" It was a well-known strategy not to chase a defeated enemy, but in this situation nobody cared about that old saying. They went for it. The Apocalypse Legion was formidable, and wherever they went, rivers of blood flowed. After returning the dragon-slaying blade to his system space, Yi Li suddenly remembered something. He quickly shouted, "Don't touch the zombies." The Jin warriors of Sky Blue Base were confused. They couldn't understand why Yi Li was saying this. Yi Li landed and looked at the countless zombie bodies piled up. He felt a pang of sadness. Life, fate, and luck. You can kill the other Dark Race members, but don't touch the Dark Knight tribe. You know the consequences if you do, Yi Li said slowly to Xiao Tsang and Tang Xiao. Xiao Tsang and Tang Xiao didn't dare to disobey Yi Li's order. They immediately passed the command to the genetic warriors of Sky Blue Base. Yi Li secretly gave an order to the Apocalypse Legion. He opened his mind and activated the synthesis grid in his brain. It was time for synthesis. After several days and nights of fighting, the zombies had once again become cannon fodder. Plus, many had died just now. There weren't many zombies left for Yi Li. However, the numbers were still quite substantial. Yi Li didn't know how long he had been synthesizing, having lost track of time. His face was becoming increasingly spirited. Alda has evolved into a 10th tier zombie. Bai Wawa has evolved into a 10th tier zombie. Hongye has evolved into a 10th tier zombie. Yutong has evolved into a 10th tier zombie. All Chi has evolved into a 10th tier zombie. Bone Maiden has been upgraded to a level 10 zombie. Long Yu has evolved into a 10th tier zombie. The 18 clawed zombies have evolved into 9th tier zombies. Chapter 442. Sky Blue Academy. This round of zombie synthesis was the most satisfying one for Yi Li. The overall strength of the Apocalypse Legion had once again reached a higher level. Yi Li also started extracting the corpse crystals from the mutant zombies' heads. Xiao Hei had successfully evolved to the 9th tier, and his skill list had also turned into Heaven and Earth Dao. Yi Li was well aware of the Heaven and Earth Dao, which allowed him to return to his true form. Yi Li wondered how gigantic Xiao Hei would become if he used the Heaven and Earth Dao. Combined with his devouring ability, it would be a sight to behold. The genetic warriors of Sky Blue Base had been watching this scene unfold. Even after 2 days and nights had passed, their expressions were becoming increasingly shocked, and in the end they were all frozen in place like statues. Xiao Tsang and Tang Xiao couldn't help but shake their heads and smile bitterly. The world was still too vast in the end. In Sky Blue Base they were among the strongest, but when looking at the entire world, what could they count as? Only someone like Yi Li could be considered the main character in this world. Black Azura returned to the Dark Knight Castle with the Dark Knight tribe members, swearing never to become enemies with Sky Blue Base again. Xiao Tsang and Tang Xiao also swore that the people of Sky Blue Base would never be enemies with the Dark Knight tribe members. Yi Li stayed in the Xiao family for 3 months, taking time to recuperate and relax. Despite his current strength, he didn't need to engage in such dull activities, but sometimes having the right mindset was important. After all, he was a demon now and he didn't want to become the kind of unforgivable demon he detested. "Mr. Yi, our family head requests your presence," a Xiao family disciple said in fright. Yi Li didn't say much and followed the disciple to the Xiao family's main hall. The main hall was filled with Xiao family elders, and Xiao Yuzhu was present as well. Everyone stood up to greet Yi Li when they saw him arrive. Yi Li, with his current status, was considered the great benefactor of Sky Blue Base. In the eyes of the common citizens of Sky Blue Base, he was nothing less than a savior. "Lord Xiao, why have you summoned me?" Yi Li looked at Xiao Tsang and spoke calmly. "Mr. Yi, the Cloud Peak Academy will be recruiting students in Sky Blue Base. Would you be interested in going to see it?" Xiao Tsang asked Yi Li cautiously. For some reason, Yi Li felt a ripple in his heart upon hearing this. It was such a familiar scene, just like when he was in Huangjiang Bay City. Lu Qingxue. Now Lu Qingxue and Quan Ruxue had gone to the Warriors Alliance, and Yi Li had no idea how they were doing. Chapter 443, Too High-Leveled, Cannot Be Tested. Xiao Yuzhu and Xia Chun were already beyond the age to enter Cloud Peak Academy. Only Xia Shi, of suitable age, nervously approached the testing device. She placed her hand on the testing device, and after it made a beep, Xia Zai's genetic aptitude and level appeared on the screen. Name, Xia Shi. Genetic aptitude, grade age, 16 years. Level, 3rd tier. Evolved being. Passed the test. Upon seeing the words on the screen, a joyful smile appeared on Xia Zai's fair face. Soon, a few more students passed and a 6th tier recruiter announced, "Now we only have one spot left." Yi Li slowly rose from his seat, which surprised Xiao Tsang and Tang Xiao. "Mr. Yi, are you leaving?" Yi Li shook his head and said, "No, I'm going for the test." Not only Xiao Tsang and Tang Xiao but also the elders and family heads of the middle 8 families were stunned. They looked at each other, feeling like they must have heard it wrong. But Yi Li really headed towards the testing device. The students of Sky Blue Academy were also astonished. They had never dreamed that Mr. Yi would actually go for the test. 2 6th-tier recruiters were taken aback, as no matter how they looked at it, Yi Li seemed to be around 20 years old, which was not the right age for Cloud Peak Academy. However, they thought Yi Li might just appear older than his real age, so they didn't immediately stop him. Yi Li slowly placed his hand on the testing device. However, the testing device emitted rapid beeping sounds, as if it had malfunctioned. Genetic aptitude is too high, level is too high, cannot be detected. Genetic aptitude is too high, level is too high, cannot be detected. The 2 6th-tier recruiters were dumbfounded, staring at the testing device in disbelief. Is the testing device malfunctioning? It's impossible. The testing device has never malfunctioned before. If the testing device detects SS-grade genetic aptitude and 5th-tier evolved being or higher, it cannot perform the test. Could it be? The 2 6th-tier evolved beings suddenly thought of a shocking possibility, and they looked at Yi Li in amazement. This student in front of them was an SS-grade talent, and he was not even a 6th-tier evolved being? This student, may first ask how old you are? One of the 6th-tier recruiters asked Yi Li. 21, Yi Li replied slowly. Both 6th-tier recruiters were shocked. Indeed, just as they had thought, Yi Li was not 15 or 16 years old. But even at the age of 21, having SS-grade talent and being a 6th-tier evolved being was an unbelievable accomplishment. This student, do you know that you are beyond the age limit for Cloud Peak Academy's enrollment? One of the 6th-tier recruiters frowned. If the test instrument was fine, then Yi Li's genetic talent and level were indeed terrifying, but there were all kinds of terrifying geniuses in the Cloud Peak Academy. In addition, everyone knew that no one above the age of 18 could enter the Cloud Peak Academy. Both 6th-tier recruiters believed that Yi Li was just here to showcase his genetic aptitude and level. Yi Li had no idea about this rule, but his expression remained calm as he looked at the 2 6th-tier recruiters and said, "I am an exception." Exception. Both 6th-tier recruiters were puzzled, and it was clear they didn't understand what Yi Li meant. "Your words are confusing to me. Please explain," one of the 6th-tier recruiters said, staring at Yi Li. "I mean, whether you recruit me or not, I will be a student," Yi Li said calmly. And his speed was unbelievably fast. After thinking for a moment, his pupils contracted rapidly. A golden spiritual attack. SSS-grade genetic aptitude. Realizing this, the 6th-tier recruiter looked at Yi Li in horror. He never would have imagined that Yi Li was an SSS-grade genetic warrior, no matter how hard he tried. Are you an SSS-grade genetic aptitude holder?" The sixth-tier recruiter asked Yi Li in astonishment. Chapter 445. Forced agreement. Yi Li smiled calmly and looked at the sixth-tier recruiter before him. What about you? Do you also want to scream in agony like him? Yi Li asked calmly. The sixth-tier evolved being was struck as if by lightning upon hearing this. He took 3 steps back again, his face filled with fear. What are you planning? The sixth-tier recruiter had reached a state of complete bewilderment. Cold sweat drenched his entire body. 111. Say it again. Let me into Cloud Peak Academy, or I promise one will make you suffer 100-fold, Yi Li said placidly. But your age is beyond the Cloud Peak Academy enrollment limit. If we let you in, we'll face severe punishment. The sixth-tier recruiter retorted. Yi Li smiled. So, are you ready to die or are you prepared to face punishment? The students of Sky Blue Academy looked at each other. They knew that if the 2 Cloud Peak Academy recruiters didn't agree with Mr. Yi, their fate would be grim. The sixth-tier recruiter knew he was no match for Yi Li, who was an SSS-grade genetic warrior. His level was undoubtedly higher as well. He looked at Yi Li's eyes and found that Yi Li's eyes were very clean. But on a closer look, the sixth-tier recruiter's heart suddenly sank. What kind of eyes were these? Under their clean eyes were indeed like black holes, as if one would enter a reincarnation cycle as long as he looked at them. Suddenly, the sixth-tier recruiter thought of something. He turned to the genetic warriors in the audience for help. These genetic warriors were pivotal figures in Sky Blue Base. However, to his surprise, the genetic warriors in the audience all started to examine their own fingers, as if they hadn't seen anything unusual. Seeing this, the sixth-tier recruiter's face turned ashen. Okay, one agree. The sixth-tier recruiter said coldly. He knew that what a person like Yi Li said was definitely not empty words. If he didn't agree, they might really die here. Yi Li gave a faint smile. He wondered why they hadn't agreed earlier. It was all so unnecessary. This is the Cloud Peak token. When Cloud Peak Academy starts, you can enter with this token. After saying that, the sixth-tier recruiter handed the token to Yi Li. Yi Li placed it in his system space with a calm expression. A few seconds later, he looked at the still screaming sixth-tier recruiter. Suddenly, he raised his palm, and a gentle golden spiritual light slowly moved towards the injured sixth-tier recruiter on the ground. When the golden spiritual light reached the wound of the sixth-tier recruiter, the gruesome blood hole began to heal before everyone's eyes at a visible speed. The sixth-tier recruiter watched in astonishment. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. What kind of miraculous technique was this? Once the wound on the ground was completely healed, the sixth-tier recruiter couldn't feel any pain. He got up from the ground and stared at Yi Li in terror. He was now secretly relieved that he hadn't offended this young man too much. Otherwise they might have met a grim end. Yi Li didn't say much and began to walk toward the outside of Sky Blue Academy. The major families in the audience watched this scene and quickly followed. The 2 sixth-tier recruiters were stunned, especially the one who had asked for help from the strong individuals in Sky Blue Base. As he watched the situation unfold, a bitter smile appeared on his face. Even if we have to risk our lives for the entire village, we will kill that beast. Yi Li observed that among the gathered people, there were 2 sixth-tier awakened beings and 1 8th-tier awakened being. He had almost forgotten that awakened beings existed, as they were far too weak in his current state. May I ask, what has happened? Xiaxi walked into the yard like a curious baby and asked. The dozens of people standing in the yard were shocked. They hurriedly turned around to look at Xiaxi. Chapter 447. Men don't cry easily. Dozens of villagers looked a bit puzzled as they observed the group of young people before them. Who are you? An elderly man in his 60s carefully examined the young people and asked in a slightly hoarse voice. Sir, we are students on our way to Cloud Peak Academy, Xiaxi replied truthfully. Yi Li was still outside the yard, listening to Xiaxi's response, and he couldn't help but shake his head silently. In the wilderness, good people typically don't die and bad people don't usually die either. It's usually only foolish people who meet such a fate. Xiaxi's response was not only foolish but also incredibly foolish. How could she say such a thing to people she didn't know? If it were heard by genetic warriors, they might decide to commit a crime and sell Cloud Peak tokens to those who needed them. These tokens held significant value. Nonetheless, it was too late now. Xiaxi had already spoken. As soon as Xiaxi responded, everyone in the yard and even those inside the house was taken aback. Even their weeping came to a halt. Seeing this, Xiaxi was puzzled. She had only spoken the truth and hadn't said anything false. Suddenly, the elderly man who had just questioned Xiaoxi knelt to the ground with a thud. "Please, sirs, help us take revenge for our village chief." Then everyone in the yard knelt down as well. Xiaoxi, Yang Xiong, Zhang Du, and Li Yun were taken aback by this scene. They had never seen anything like it. For a moment they were at a loss. Yi Li entered the yard and walked over to them. The people from inside the house also came out at this point. An 8th-tier awakened being observed Yi Li and his group. This 8th-tier awakened being was a middle-aged man. He was initially surprised but soon revealed a very joyful smile. "Dear sirs, one can sense a terrifying aura from all of you. One assume you are all evolved beings." Yi Li nodded and then looked at the people who were kneeling in the yard. "Please everyone stand up." Even though he wasn't a good person, Yi Li couldn't help but sigh when he saw this scene. Surviving in such a post-apocalyptic world was no easy task. It was not as safe and prosperous as his original world. The people on the ground knew that genetic warriors were typically arrogant. If they didn't stand up, it would be a blow to the genetic warrior's pride. Therefore, as soon as Yi Li had finished speaking, they all got up from the ground. "Tell us what happened," Yi Li said to the 8th-tier awakened being. The 8th-tier awakened being quickly explained, "Recently, a fierce tiger appeared in the mountains. This tiger is incredibly powerful and has already eaten several people from our village. Our village chief was the strongest individual in our village, a low-tier awakened being." Chapter 448. Searching for the fierce tiger. The 8th-tier awakened being quickly arranged accommodations for the group. Xiaoxi and the others had traveled all day and were feeling tired, so they soon went to sleep. Yi Li looked out the window at the clear night sky, where stars and a bright moon adorned the firmament. He thought that he would be able to see Xiao Hui and the others again soon, and he found himself looking forward to it. All encounters in the world are like long-lost reunions. The scene when they meet again, Yi Li wondered what it would be like. He too eventually fell asleep. The next day, the system's notification sound appeared promptly in Yi Li's mind. Zombie chest X25. Yi Li opened the zombie chests with a single click. Acquired 1500 genetic points, 1500 strength points, 1500 speed points, 1500 defense points. Acquired S-class skill, Demonic Devil Blade Cross Slash. Yi Li had a slightly thrilled expression on his face. He integrated the attribute points he had acquired into his body and then looked at the description of the Demonic Devil Blade Cross Slash. Demonic Devil Blade Cross Slash. An S-class skill that, when activated, changes the heavens and the earth. It unleashes a blood-red cross slash that carries the might of countless demonic and devilish phantoms, capable of devastating the world. Yi Li thought it wasn't too bad. He had gained another skill. Ding. Do you wish to practice the Demonic Devil Blade Cross Slash? Yes. 10%, 30%, 60%, 100%. Demonic Devil Blade Cross Slash practice successful. The Demonic Devil Blade Cross Slash was currently Yi Li's weakest skill since his other skills had already reached SSS level. Xiaoxi and her companions also woke up, and after a quick wash-up, they prepared to go into the mountains to find the fierce tiger. The villagers watched them leave with hope in their eyes, wishing that Yi Li and his group could eliminate the tiger on the mountain. It wasn't long before the group arrived at the mountain that the 8th-tier awakened being had mentioned. The mountain was covered in ancient towering trees and resembled a primeval forest. Various kinds of poisonous insects crawled on the trees. Yi Li used the heavenly spirit eyes to search for signs. Just as he activated them, a fierce wind suddenly started blowing. As the saying goes, clouds come from a dragon and wind comes from a tiger. A huge tiger about 5 meters long suddenly burst out of the forest. The tiger's eyes were blood-red and sent chills down one's spine. Its muscles were as tough as a coiled dragon. There was no doubt that this was a tiger infected with the zombie virus. The fierce tiger glared fiercely at the group. Its teeth, which were over 20 centimeters long, began to gleam coldly, and it looked like it could pounce at any moment. Chapter 449. Senior, can you help them? Xiao He was naturally of the power attribute, and it was easy to imagine the weight of his paw. This fierce tiger was only at the 2nd tier in terms of strength, so when Xiao He gave it a single paw, the fierce tiger was instantly sent flying, crashing into over a dozen trees and creating a large crater in the ground where it landed. Master, am one amazing? Xiao He was excited and jumping around on the ground. Yi Li thought Xiao He was quite mischievous. If he got a chance, he should try to find a female dog or something like that for him, but it would have to be of the divine beast lineage at the very least. Master, I used a lot of effort. Can you give me some top-grade dog food? Xiao He's eyes were filled with expectation. Ever since he had eaten top-grade dog food in the zombie paradise in the Sky Blue Bay City, he hadn't forgotten how good it tasted. Yi Li was momentarily stunned. He hadn't expected Xiaohei to still remember that top-grade dog food. This surprised him. He then purchased a pound of top-grade dog food from the Point Mall, and Xiaohei ate it with great relish. Xia Shi and her companions almost drooled when they saw him. After the earth-shattering battle, Yi Li had spent 3 months in the Sky Blue Bay City. During that time, every genetic warrior of the Bay City had known about Yi Li's Apocalypse Legion. There was nothing too surprising about that. After Xiaohei had eaten his fill, Yi Li put him back into the system space. "Bring this fierce tiger back," Yi Li said slowly. The others nodded, and Yang Xiong and Zhang Du quickly approached the large crater, looking at the fierce tiger inside. The fierce tiger had no signs of life left in it, and its body was twisted. Subsequently, they carried the fierce tiger back to the village. "Do you think the seniors will be able to kill that beast?" "I think it should be fine. The Cloud Peak Academy is one of the academies operated by the Warrior Alliance, and it's very strong." "I don't know. This fierce tiger is so terrifying." The 8th-tier awakened being's face sank when he heard that. "Why are you talking so much nonsense? Well, know when the masters come back." However, his words were cut off when someone suddenly exclaimed, "The masters are back." With the exclamation, the villagers hurriedly looked ahead. Upon seeing them, the villagers couldn't help but cheer. "Look, the masters have brought the fierce tiger back. The masters are really amazing." When the 8th-tier awakened being saw this scene, he too couldn't help but feel joy in his heart. With the death of this fierce tiger, not only had they avenged their village chief, but their village could also be peaceful again for the time being. The villagers eagerly welcomed them. For them, this was the biggest celebration in history. They thought they must have misheard. How could someone dare to say that their big sister was only a 4th-tier evolved being? Especially since the person saying this was only a 3rd-tier evolved being. You just wait for me, he'll go call our big sister." Wang Kong roared and prepared to leave. At this moment, the restaurant door suddenly swung open. A young girl with braided hair who looked extremely proud walked in. Wang Kong hurriedly went to meet her. "Big sister, these people are saying you're nothing." Wang Kong glared at the group. The young girl was named Yu Ling, and when she heard this she was momentarily stunned, then she regained her composure and looked at Yi Li and his group. "You actually said I'm nothing?" Yu Ling put her hands on her hips. In their base city, she was the supreme genius, and everyone who saw her treated her with utmost respect. Chapter 452. Yu Ling's shock. "Leave," Yi Li suddenly spoke slowly. "Didn't you hear it? Leave or you'll regret it," Xiaoxi added. Wang Kong and the others were shocked. They really didn't expect that they could still be so calm when their big sister was here. Did they really not know how powerful their big sister was? "What did you say?" Yu Ling gritted her teeth and stared at Yi Li. Yi Li smiled faintly. "Why is it that when the tree wants to be quiet, the wind never stops blowing?" "I've already given you a chance to leave, but it seems you don't want to take it," Yi Li said calmly. The people in the restaurant were stunned. They thought, could this person be even stronger than a 4th-tier evolved being? "Today if I don't beat you, my last name isn't you," Yu Ling said coldly to Yi Li. "Big sister is about to take action, let's step back a bit," Wang Kong said. Then Wang Kong and the few young men stepped back a few paces. "It's ridiculous that a 4th-tier evolved being would want to attack Senior," Xiaoxi shook her head. Upon hearing this, everyone in the restaurant unanimously agreed that Yi Li must be stronger than a 4th-tier evolved being, or why would these 3rd-tier evolved beings call him Senior with such confidence? Yu Ling was surprised when she heard this. She never dreamed that someone would dare to speak so audaciously to her. "Prepare to get beaten," Yu Ling shouted angrily, raising her hand with a purple aura forming around it. Bone-penetrating palm. Yu Ling struck at Yi Li with her palm. "It's actually the bone-penetrating palm. It seems big sister wants to take him down in one blow." The bone-penetrating palm was in level skill, and it was Yu Ling's most powerful move. She knew that with this one strike Yi Li would surely be knocked down. What surprised her was that Yi Li didn't seem to have any intention of dodging, as if he hadn't even seen the palm coming at him. Could he be terrified silly by my bone-penetrating palm? Yu Ling thought to herself when the bone-penetrating palm was only a hair's breadth away from Yi Li. The people in the restaurant widened their eyes. They knew very well how powerful this move was. If Yi Li didn't dodge, he would likely lose half his life if not more. Without a doubt, the bone-penetrating palm hit Yi Li. Yu Ling's fair face revealed a happy smile. She was certain of Yi Li's fate. But what she couldn't have imagined was that Yi Li's body remained completely motionless, and his face showed no reaction at all. It was as if her bone-penetrating palm was merely scratching an itch for Yi Li. How is this possible? Guardian Fox couldn't believe it. She truly couldn't believe that this was real. And level skill like the bone-penetrating palm, and it had no effect when it struck this person. Chapter 453. School began in Cloud Peak Academy. Yuling had never seen anyone like Yi Li before, and she looked at him in utter astonishment. Yi Li's appearance was undeniably the most attractive she had ever seen, but that wasn't the key point. The real shock was his strength. The fact that her bone-penetrating palm had no effect on this person, apart from revealing his incredible defense, indicated his level. Yuling couldn't bring herself to think about it any further. She really didn't want to. "Let's go," Yuling said to the people behind her. Her fair face was filled with desolation. She, who had always been arrogant, had finally encountered someone who made her feel anything but proud. Suddenly Yuling recalled what her father had told her. "Linger, even though your genetic talent and level are good, this world is full of geniuses. When you go to Cloud Peak Academy you must keep a low profile." Back then she had scorned his advice, but now she realized she had been a joke. Just as Yuling and Wang Kong were preparing to leave, Yi Li stopped them. "Wait." Yuling turned back, looking at Yi Li with a puzzled expression. "I told you I've already given you a chance to leave, but you didn't appreciate it," Yi Li spoke slowly. Upon hearing this, Yuling and Wang Kong were both taken aback. What do you want?" Yuling asked. Yi Li smiled. "You've seen it, we spent a fair amount of money on this food and you?" Yuling quickly understood his meaning and had Wang Kong settle the bill. She was eager to leave the restaurant now because she felt utterly embarrassed. "Senior, you're truly amazing," Xiaxi said with a smile. Yang Xiong, Zhang Du and Li Yun felt the same way. They had immense admiration for Yi Li. Their respect for him had reached an unimaginable level. The people in the restaurant were all exchanging bewildered glances. Most of them were heading to Cloud Peak Academy, and in their home cities, they were considered geniuses. However, when compared to Yi Li, they couldn't help but feel overshadowed. Yi Li and his group stayed in Yun City for several days, and finally, the day for the school opening of Cloud Peak Academy arrived. Thousands of new students headed towards Cloud Peak Mountain, and after presenting their Cloud Peak tokens, Yi Li and his group arrived at the Cloud Peak Academy's training ground. The training ground was filled with thousands of new students, and their faces were more or less filled with smiles. Entering Cloud Peak Academy represented limitless future achievements for them. At this moment, a woman in her late 20s, dressed in martial attire, stood before them. She was a 7th-tier evolved being. "I am your new student mentor. My name is Feng Ling and you can call me Mentor Feng Ling. Now what you have to do is challenge the martial tower. The higher the level you reach, the greater the rewards you will receive." Feng Ling scanned the new students and said. All the new students were delighted to hear this. They had never expected that they would be rewarded so soon after arriving at Cloud Peak Academy. "Now, I will take you to the martial tower." Shortly after, Feng Ling led the group towards the martial tower. In a matter of minutes, the new students all gathered at the base of the tower. The martial tower had 30 levels and had an exquisite appearance. "Now, let's begin the challenge of the martial tower." With a light command from Feng Ling, the new students began rushing towards the tower in a mad scramble. As the tower's entrance was only so wide, a chaotic situation erupted, and it eventually devolved into a brawl. Xia Zai's group also joined in the scuffle, but Yi Li remained in place. Chapter 454. Challenging the martial tower. Yi Li looked on with indifference at the brawl involving thousands of students. Such scenes were quite rare. Feng Ling glanced at Yi Li, her fair face filled with curiosity. "Why aren't you challenging the martial tower?" Feng Ling asked. Yi Li smiled and replied, "When the snipe and the clam grapple, the fisherman profits. Don't you understand this principle?" Feng Ling was taken aback. She hadn't expected Yi Li to say something like that to her. Then, her expression turned cold. "Do you not realize that 1am your mentor?" In Feng Ling's eyes, Yi Li should be a hidden genius who was only acting arrogantly because geniuses tended to be like that. She had encountered many such individuals. However, in Cloud Peak Academy, which was established by the Warriors Alliance, geniuses were in no short supply. "One, know you're a new student mentor, but what does that have to do with me?" He didn't even look at Feng Ling and instead watched the chaotic scene of the students brawling. Finally, someone initiated a challenge on the martial tower. Feng Ling was astonished. As a new student mentor at Cloud Peak Academy, she had never encountered such an arrogant new student before. You apologize for what you just said. Feng Ling ground her teeth. She knew that someone like Yi Li who acted so arrogantly would likely not last 3 minutes in the wilderness due to his blatant hubris. Yi Li smiled again. He had come to Cloud Peak Academy not to train but to meet with Xiao Hui and the others. Feng Ling had genuinely mistaken him for a student. In this parallel world there couldn't be many people who could be Yi Li's teacher, could there? Feng Ling was taken aback by Yi Li's smile and was unable to fathom how he could smile at a time like this. She couldn't help but become angry, staring coldly at Yi Li. One told you to apologize to me. Didn't you hear me? Feng Ling was furious. To be honest, Yi Li had no intention of clashing with someone like Feng Ling, a 7th-tier evolved being. In his eyes, 7th-tier evolved beings were rather weak. But if he ignored her, Feng Ling would not give up. Nevertheless, Yi Li had no choice but to tell her to shut up. Has anyone ever reached the highest level of the martial tower? Yi Li asked Feng Ling calmly. Feng Ling was once again taken aback, not understanding what Yi Li meant by that. Could it be? Feng Ling suddenly thought of a shocking possibility which was, then she quickly shook her head, believing that it was impossible. No, since the establishment of Cloud Peak Academy, no one has ever reached the highest level of the martial tower. Although Feng Ling didn't have a good impression of Yi Li, she wanted to see what Yi Li was up to. Yi Li smiled leisurely and slowly said to Feng Ling, "Believe it or not, I can rush to the first floor of the martial tower." As soon as she said this, Feng Ling was stunned. She swore that she was really stunned. Rush to the first floor of the martial tower? Other than the ramblings of a fool, she couldn't come up with a better explanation. This student, you're concealing your realm, but I guess your realm is at most that of a 4th-tier evolved being. Let me tell you, there are many geniuses in this world, some are mountains you can never surpass. Perhaps in your base city you're an absolute genius, but at the Cloud Peak Academy, you're nothing, just a newcomer. Feng Ling had already figured out what kind of person Yi Li was, even though she had never seen anyone as arrogant as him. However, Yi Li remained calm, showing no signs of exertion. Upon reaching the 8th level, he spotted Xia Shi, who was struggling to progress to the 9th level. "Senior, I can't go any further," Xia Shi said, her voice strained. "Stay here then," Yi Li said calmly. After that, he continued his ascent. Surprisingly, some of the students at Cloud Peak Academy this time were indeed talented. Yi Li encountered new students on the upper levels. Nonetheless, the number of students who had entered the martial tower was still relatively small, as most of them were engaged in external battles. However, they were now lying on the ground, unable to recover due to the pressure of the 5th level of the ancient devil tome. Before Yi Li felt any pressure, he had reached the 30th floor. And the 30th floor was already the highest floor. Chapter 456. First place. Yi Li. Feng Ling stared at the illuminated 30th level, and her pupils rapidly contracted. Suddenly, she remembered the words Yi Li had said to her not long ago. "Do you believe that I can reach the 30th level?" At that time she had not believed it, but now, with the 30th level lit up, it meant that someone had reached it. The new students outside the martial tower had their eyes wide open, wider than ever before, and their mouths were agape. Even though they were seeing the martial tower for the first time, they had heard of it before. They were well aware that no one had ever reached the top of the martial tower. At this moment, then the results appeared on a monument next to the martial tower. 1st place. Yi Li. Number of levels reached, 302nd place. Xu Xiao. Number of levels reached, 183rd place. Zhang Bai. Number of levels reached, 154th place. Yuling. Number of levels reached, 14. At this moment, Yi Li was on the 30th level of the martial tower, looking out of the window at the scenery below. He had expected the martial tower to exert some pressure on him, but to his surprise he felt none, even though it was Cloud Peak Academy's martial tower. Subsequently, Yi Li casually descended the tower. By this time, a crowd had gathered outside the martial tower to check the results on the monument. Their reactions were a mixture of shock and disbelief. The first place had reached the 30th level? That was the top level. Although these students had never seen the martial tower before, they had certainly heard of it. Since the establishment of Cloud Peak Academy, no one had ever reached the 30th level. But Yi Li had actually achieved this? This can't be possible. Yuling, shocked beyond belief, stared at the monument. She had never imagined that Yi Li could reach the 30th level. Cloud Peak Academy's martial tower is nothing special. I haven't even exerted myself and already became second. At this moment, a young man in the crowd burst into laughter. The other students were taken aback and turned to look at the source of the laughter. Is that the second place holder, Xu Xiao? The students were bewildered because most of them didn't have tierings. To them, anyone who could achieve second place was an insurmountable figure. Although Xiaxi had a ranking, it was very low. However, there was a trace of joy on her fair face. She knew Senior would be first, but seeing his name in the first place on the monument still brought her immense joy. The second place holder, Xu Xiao, was incredibly handsome. He was now proudly pleased that he had obtained second place without exerting much effort. However, first place, Xu Xiao's heart sank, for he knew that achieving the 30th level was an impossible feat in his eyes. At that moment he noticed another young man who was 100 times more handsome than him. This left him in shock. In their home base city he was considered the most handsome person. He couldn't believe that there was someone in the world who was even more attractive. Xu Xiao watched as Yi Li approached, and many new students had already gathered around Xu Xiao. They were clearly trying to curry favor with him. Yi Li stopped in front of Xu Xiao and looked at him calmly. "You're blocking my way." Xu Xiao sneered, "I've never made way for anyone." Xia Shi and Yang Xiong, along with others, stood beside Yi Li, glaring coldly at Xu Xiao. Chapter 457, I really don't want to deal with an insignificant ant like you at this point. Most of the new students had learned that Xu Xiao had taken the second place in the martial tower. Naturally, they stood on Xu Xiao's side, hoping to gain his favor. Yi Li smiled. Xu Xiao was only a fourth-tier evolved being, and it was ridiculous for him to say such things to Yi Li. "Senior told you to move, so move," Xiaxi told Xu Xiao firmly. Xu Xiao laughed at her words. "Senior?" Hee. In their home base city, Xu Xiao was undoubtedly a genius. Now, hearing a third-tier evolved being say such things to him was quite amusing. "If I don't move, what will you do?" Xu Xiao's handsome face showed a hint of playfulness. Feng Ling did not intervene. She was too overwhelmed to do anything. These new students might not realize how difficult it was to reach the top level of the martial tower. She wanted to see just how powerful Yi Li really was. As a new student mentor at Cloud Peak Academy, she had never felt this way before. Yi Li shook his head inwardly. He had already given Xu Xiao the chance to step aside, but Xu Xiao refused. What could Yi Li do? Yu Ling, Wang Kong, and others knew that Xu Xiao's fate would not be pleasant. He would never know how terrifying Yi Li truly was. She remembered the scene in the restaurant and felt a sudden sense of unease. "Move aside. I really don't want to deal with an insignificant ant like you," Yi Li said to Xu Xiao calmly. "What?" The new students were shocked when they heard his words. They couldn't believe that Yi Li considered the second-place holder an insignificant ant. If the second-place holder was an ant, what were they? "How dare you call me an ant?" Xu Xiao gritted his teeth and spoke coldly. In their home base city, Xu Xiao was undoubtedly a top-tier genius, an insurmountable mountain for the younger generation. Yet even someone like him was referred to as an ant. Hee, Yi Li smiled openly. "What are you laughing at?" Xu Xiao couldn't understand why Yi Li was still smiling. After a few seconds of contemplation, Yi Li said calmly to Xu Xiao, "What are you if not an insignificant ant as a fourth-tier evolved being?" The new students were stunned when they heard this. They were genuinely shocked. A fourth-tier evolved being was actually an ant? This was a fourth-tier evolved being. Xu Xiao hadn't expected Yi Li to say such words and stared at him intently. "Do you believe one will make you pay for what you said?" Xu Xiao roared. Xiaxi smiled and remembered how terrifying Yi Li was in the wilderness zone. Even a 10th-tier evolved being wasn't able to defeat Senior. All the genetic warriors in the Sky Blue Base City witnessed the scene of Yi Li fighting a 10th-tier member of the Dark Race in midair that day. They would never forget such a shocking battle even if they spent their entire lives. Yi Li shook his head. He had just come to the Cloud Peak Academy and really didn't want to show off too much, but it seemed that Xu Xiao didn't give him such a chance. Yi Li slowly raised his index finger, which was entangled with golden spiritual light. Suddenly the finger fell. A shocking blast of golden spiritual energy shot toward Xu Xiao. Xu Xiao had no chance of blocking such an attack and watched in horror as it approached. Feng Ling was even more shocked. Even she might not be able to stop this kind of attack. "Stop!" She could only shout at Yi Li. Chapter 458. The shock of the new students. Feng Ling shouted at Yi Li to stop. However, the arrow was already released, and the attack with golden spiritual energy had been unleashed. Xu Xiao had no chance to defend against such an attack, and his pupils constricted rapidly. "I'm done," Xu Xiao cried out. This attack was utterly terrifying. "Ah!" Xu Xiao let out a deafening scream, making everyone's skin crawl. The new students were stunned. Xu Xiao was the second best among the new students, and yet he was defeated with a single strike. It seemed like golden spiritual energy just now, one of the new students remarked in shock. When the people around the new student heard this, they were shocked to the extreme. Golden spiritual energy? Golden spiritual energy corresponded to SSS-level genetic talent. The new student's eyes widened more than ever before. SSS-level genetic talent was something they had only heard of in legends, and they had never encountered it in reality. Feng Ling stared at Yi Li in disbelief. She never imagined that Yi Li was an SSS-level genetic warrior. She thought Xu Xiao was going to die, but now that she saw he was still alive, she breathed a sigh of relief. At this moment, Xu Xiao was writhing in agony on the ground. He had never experienced such a severe injury. In Yi Li's eyes, he was merely a hothouse flower. A young man swallowed hard, realizing that compared to Yi Li, he was nothing. The young man was none other than the third-place holder in the Martial Tower trial, Zhang Bai. May first ask who you are? Zhang Bai asked Yi Li, scared. Yi Li. Yi Li spoke slowly. What? The new students gasped when they heard this. Yi Li? Yi Li, the first-place holder who reached the 30th level of the Martial Tower? Now they finally understood why Yi Li had been so arrogant earlier. He had set a record by reaching the 30th level of the Martial Tower. The new students looked at Yi Li again. Yi Li's figure was not majestic, but in their eyes, he stood as tall as a mountain at this moment. They could never have imagined that there was someone like Yi Li in the world. Yi Li didn't pay any attention to the new students' reactions. He turned slowly and gazed calmly at Feng Ling. You said that the higher level one reaches in the Martial Tower, the greater the rewards, right? Yi Li asked her. Feng Ling was taken aback by his question and stared at him in astonishment. Suddenly, she noticed the profound killing intent hidden in the corners of Yi Li's eyes, with an imposing aura that extended both before and behind him. Was this really just a student? Top 100 follow me, Feng Ling said to the new students. Xia Zai's ranking was in the 30s, while Yang Xiong and others hadn't even entered the Martial Tower because they were only second-tier evolved beings. Chapter 459. Merely an illusion. Yi Li glanced lightly at the 10 cultivation speed elixirs in Feng Ling's hand. He had anticipated a great reward for achieving the top position in the Martial Tower. But to him, these 10 elixirs were no different from trash. They'll pass. Cultivation speed elixirs are of no use to me, Yi Li said casually. The new students were astonished at his words. These elixirs were treasures. They coveted them but couldn't obtain any. Yet here was Yi Li dismissing their value. Comparisons truly could be frustrating. Feng Ling furrowed her brow, giving Yi Li a cold stare. Despite Yi Li climbing to the highest level of the Martial Tower and being an SSS-grade genetic warrior, injuring someone upon his arrival at Cloud Peak Academy and causing Xu Xiao's injury meant he would face severe consequences if Xu Xiao's condition worsened. Apart from the warrior's arena, Cloud Peak Academy strictly prohibited violence in other areas. Feng Ling acknowledged Yi Li's astonishing talent and didn't wish for him to face consequences. In fact, when Yi Li intervened with Xu Xiao, consequences were imminent. However, she never expected Yi Li to be so unappreciative. If you don't want it, just leave it. Feng Ling glared at Yi Li in anger. Yi Li's expression remained unchanged, for he spoke no falsehood. Those elixirs truly held no benefit for him. But why was Feng Ling so angry? Was truth-telling frowned upon in this parallel world? Soon, Feng Ling led the group back to the playground. The new students sighed in disappointment. They regretted not storming the Martial Tower, missing the chance for a reward. Yi Li returned to Xia Shi and the others. He had considered giving the reward to Xia Shi in the group, but then he realized he had countless ways to help Xia Shi level up if he wanted. Yet what was the use? In the academy, it was all just sheltered cultivation. Only genetic warriors who had experienced countless battles in the wilderness were truly suitable for the post-apocalyptic world. Dear students, perhaps you don't know this. This isn't the real Cloud Peak Academy, it's merely an illusion. The Martial Tower you challenged is prepared for new students. So, those of you with good results don't get too cocky. In Cloud Peak Academy, geniuses are plentiful. Feng Ling glanced at Yi Li as she spoke. Yi Li, knowing his own worth, understood that Feng Ling's words might have been directed at him to some extent. But he didn't need to concern himself with it. What surprised him, though, was that this place was just an illusion. The new students were also taken aback. They believed the buildings before their eyes were the Cloud Peak Academy. Now, I'll show you the real Cloud Peak Academy, Feng Ling addressed the students. As she spoke, Feng Ling formed hand seals and murmured incantations. Chapter 460. Feng Ling's anger, new students in the top 100 will be under my direct supervision, Feng Ling continued. Following this, she divided the students by their tiers. Yili and Xiaxi became Feng Ling's students. Yili, I'm sorry about what happened last time. A voice as clear as a skylark's call reached Yili's ears. Yili followed the voice and saw that Yu Ling and Wang Kong were standing in front of him. Both Yu Ling and Wang Kong were in the top 100 and they were Feng Ling students now. I've already given you a lesson last time. No need to apologize. Yili looked at Yu Ling indifferently. Yu Ling's face showed a bit of disappointment. She bit her teeth and looked at Yili. Yili, can you? Yu Ling didn't continue her words, she hesitated. Yili remained silent. His expression was unchanged and he knew that Yu Ling had more to say. After a few seconds, Yu Ling finally gathered her courage. Yili, can you protect us in the future? Yili was slightly surprised. He thought Yu Ling wanted to let go of the incident at the restaurant. He didn't expect Yu Ling to ask for his protection. If it weren't for the fact that Yu Ling was also a student of Cloud Peak Academy, he might have already forgotten about her. Since he transmigrated to this parallel world, he had encountered countless people Yu Ling. If he remembered every one of them, his brain would probably explode. Ha, you were so tough in the restaurant, calling yourself big sister, and now you want senior to protect you? Xiaxi looked at Yu Ling indignantly. Why do you care what one say when I'm talking to Yili? It's not like I want you to protect me, Yu Ling said disdainfully, glancing at Xiaxi. Xiaxi was a third-tier evolved being and she was a fourth-tier evolved being. She still felt a little superior to Xiaxi. You? Xiaxi stared at Yu Ling angrily. Yu Ling just rolled her eyes at Xiaxi and didn't bother to look at her further. Xiaxi stomped her feet in anger and turned her head away. Yili, you haven't answered my question, Yu Ling cautiously asked Yili. Yili couldn't help but smile. In truth, Yu Ling was quite interesting, a tsundere rich girl who hadn't experienced many hardships. Up to you, Yili replied casually. Yu Ling was surprised. Yili, does that mean you agreed? Yili didn't respond. Instead, he heard Feng Ling say, Dear students, next I'll take you to the classrooms. Feng Ling then led the top 100 students toward their classroom. Upon reaching the classrooms, Feng Ling assigned seats to the students. In Cloud Peak Academy, learning wasn't just about practicing. Sometimes there were other matters to discuss. It was Yili's turn to be seated. Yili, go sit there, Feng Ling pointed to a seat. Yili smiled and looked at Feng Ling. I don't like that seat. Feng Ling knew that Yili wasn't easy to deal with. She tried to calm herself and said, Yili, then where would you like to sit? Yili smiled again. I don't need a seat. He had come to Cloud Peak Academy to see Xiao Hui and the others. He didn't expect there to be a freshman institute. It was quite troublesome. Although Cloud Peak Academy was established by the Warrior Alliance, it meant little to him. Yili, are you here at Cloud Peak Academy to cultivate or not? Feng Ling stared at Yili and scolded angrily. Chapter 461. Take me to the Senior Students Institute. Feng Ling thought that even with Yili's terrifying genetic talent and probably a high realm, he shouldn't have this kind of attitude. She couldn't figure out Yili's exact realm, but she assumed he might be a 5th-tier evolved being. A 5th-tier evolved being with an SSS-level genetic talent could easily defeat a 4th-tier evolved being with a single blow. Yili, you need to tell me right now if you came to Cloud Peak Academy to cultivate or not. If not, you can leave anytime. Feng Ling stared at Yili, fully aware that individuals with such incredible talents and high levels often displayed extreme arrogance. But such people wouldn't last a minute in the wilderness. You're absolutely right, I didn't come to Cloud Peak Academy to cultivate, Yili said calmly. You? Feng Ling glared at Yili. She expected that her words would make Yili realize his arrogance and back down. She hadn't imagined that he would press on. Take me to see a few people. They were admitted to Cloud Peak Academy last year, Yili suddenly said to Feng Ling. The other new students were utterly stunned by Yili's behavior. They couldn't have anticipated that he would speak to his instructor this way. Xiaxi felt a bit disheartened. She had asked Yili before coming to Cloud Peak Academy, and he had answered her questions honestly. Feng Ling was taken aback, not understanding what Yili meant. Yili, what exactly do you mean? They entered the Cloud Peak Academy last year. Just take me there. Feng Ling was surprised. She wondered if Yili entered the Cloud Peak Academy just to meet someone. In a world where many aspired to enter Cloud Peak Academy, this young man had managed to get in and was only here to meet people. Yili, you want to meet senior students? Feng Ling asked Yili. Yili nodded. Sort of. Feng Ling contemplated for a few seconds before saying, all right, since you want to meet them, I'll take you. She thought that by letting Yi Li visit the Senior Students' Institute, he could see just how terrifying geniuses in this world could be. Then he would understand how abundant talents were in this world. She was doing it for Yi Li's own good. Unfortunately, she had no idea that Yi Li was a 10th-tier evolved being, and his Apocalypse Legion was terrifying beyond belief. If she knew, she would realize how absurd her thoughts were. Dear students, you're free to move around now. After giving her instructions, Feng Ling took Yi Li to the Senior Students' Institute. The Senior Students' Institute and the Freshman Institute were not in the same place. Feng Ling led Yi Li toward the Senior Students' Institute. For some reason, Yi Li was really eager to see Xiao Hui and the others. He couldn't stand moving at such a slow pace. Give me your hand, Yi Li told Feng Ling. Feng Ling was puzzled. What do you mean? I told you to give me your hand. As a new student instructor of Cloud Peak Academy, you wouldn't have difficulty understanding my words, would you? Yi Li said indifferently. Feng Ling swore it was the first time she had been this surprised in her entire life. This person, he was a lecher? She wanted to refuse, but then a powerful grip took hold of her hand. After that, she couldn't say anything, she just felt herself moving at high speed. Yi Li's skill, swift steps, was now at an SSS level. He could walk 10,000 miles during a day and 8,000 miles during a night with that skill. Yi Li smiled and calmly spoke to Rindong. He'll give you 1 second to disappear or there will be serious consequences. Rindong was shocked once again. This person was so arrogant? Rindong had met many arrogant individuals, but he had never seen someone this arrogant, not even heard of. Feng Ling, who is he? Rindong gritted his teeth and asked. He couldn't figure out Yi Li's realm, but even a first-tier evolved being could hide their realm. This wasn't worth mentioning. Rindong thought that Yi Li's audacity might be due to some extraordinary background, and he needed to find out more before proceeding. He's a new student at Cloud Peak Academy, Feng Ling finally said after a few seconds. Chapter 463, Do you dare to fight on the life and death arena? A new student? Rindong was taken aback. In his opinion, Yi Li must be the young master of some super family, or he wouldn't be so arrogant. Could it be that he came to Cloud Peak Academy just to experience life? May first ask which family you belong to? To be on the safe side, Rindong decided to find out more. Yi Li smiled to himself. Why was it that he was willing to give people a chance, yet they never seemed to appreciate it? I don't belong to any family, Yi Li said calmly. I gave you 1 second to disappear in front of me. Why didn't you seize this opportunity? Yi Li continued to speak to Rindong. Rindong was infuriated. He couldn't remember the last time he had been this angry. Young man, are you looking for trouble? However, Feng Ling showed no signs of trying to intervene. She wanted to see Rindong put Yi Li in his place, especially after Yi Li had said she wasn't qualified to be his girlfriend. No matter where you went, there were always people who enjoyed watching a spectacle. Rindong's voice was loud, and many Cloud Peak Academy students heard him. They rushed over to see what was happening. Who is this guy? How dare he confront Instructor Rindong? I don't know, a newcomer is fearless, but wait, Instructor Rindong will make him regret it. Perhaps when Instructor Rindong reveals his true strength, this person will be scared out of his wits. All the students pitied Yi Li, and it was clear to them what his fate would be. They looked at Yi Li, but to their surprise, his face remained calm, as if he hadn't noticed the punch that was about to hit him. How can a person like you change? Yi Li looked at Rindong indifferently. Hearing this, Rindong was even more furious. He raised his fist and punched Yi Li. If a low-leveled evolved being was hit by this punch, he would definitely die. Feng Ling's eyes widened. She thought that Rindong just wanted to teach Yi Li a lesson. She never dreamed that Rindong would launch such a terrifying punch. She wanted to stop him, but Rindong's fist had already reached Yi Li. None of the students expected that Yi Li had no intention of dodging at all, and his face was as calm as water, as if he didn't see the punch coming at him at all. Some students even closed their eyes, unable to bear the thought of witnessing a bloody scene. At that moment, Rindong's fist was mere inches from Yi Li. In the blink of an eye, Yi Li suddenly disappeared from where he stood, leaving only a blurry afterimage. What? Rindong, Feng Ling and the other students were all shocked. They couldn't fathom how Yi Li had vanished in an instant. They frantically searched for Yi Li, and when they finally spotted him, he was already behind Rindong. Rindong turned around, only to find Yi Li looking at him with a calm expression. Ali. Rindong had just opened his mouth to speak when he felt intense pain in his body. Then he was sent flying and landed heavily on the ground. More and more students gathered on the training field, numbering in the thousands. They all looked at each other in disbelief. The events they had witnessed today had left them utterly shocked. Ren Dong struggled to his feet and glared at Yi Li with malice in his eyes. No one had dared to strike him since he was born. Do you dare to fight in the life and death arena? Ren Dong stared at Yi Li. Chapter 464. The Life and Death Arena. The Life and Death Arena? Yi Li had never heard of it before, but he could easily deduce its meaning. When Ren Dong mentioned it, the other students were left in shock. The Life and Death Arena was an arena where the two sides competed regardless of life or death. Both parties needed to agree and then sign an agreement. All the students looked at Yi Li, wondering if he would accept the challenge. They were now somewhat excited. They had initially thought that Yi Li wouldn't be able to withstand the punch from instructor Ren Dong. However, they now understood that not only were they wrong but they were utterly mistaken. Ren Dong, what do you want? Feng Ling stared at Ren Dong and asked. Ren Dong ignored Feng Ling and continued to stare at Yi Li. Yi Li calmly smiled and responded, the life and death arena? Since you want to challenge me to a life and death duel, it would be impolite of me not to accept, wouldn't it? The news of a life and death duel quickly spread throughout Cloud Peak Academy. And the president, vice president and academy instructors all rushed to the scene. At that moment, a man in his 60s who was an 8th-tier evolved being walked over. The man glanced at Ren Dong and then at Yi Li. Do you truly wish to fight in the life and death arena? The old man asked in a deep voice. Yes. Ren Dong answered firmly. Yes. Yi Li nodded. The old man sighed and said, what are your names? Ren Dong. Yi Li. The old man then printed 2 copies of an agreement, each with the respective names of the participants. After pressing your fingerprints on them, the agreement will become effective. Yi Li and Ren Dong pressed their fingerprints on the documents, and the old man collected them. You may proceed to the life and death arena. Ren Dong walked over to the nearby life and death arena and stared coldly at Yi Li. Come up. Ren Dong beckoned to Yi Li. Yi Li smiled faintly and then leaped gracefully onto the life and death arena with incredible agility, covering the distance in less than a second. The other students were left stunned. His speed was astonishingly fast. They barely had time to follow his movements before he had already reached the life and death arena. President, what kind of person is Yi Li? The vice president asked. Both the vice president and the president were 10th-tier evolved beings, roughly 70 years old. I don't know, the president shook his head. Then do you think Yi Li will win? The vice president continued. It's hard to say, the president replied, gazing at Yi Li. He had a feeling that there was something mysterious about Yi Li. Yi Li, do you know what it means to fight in the life and death arena? Ren Dong sneered coldly. Yi Li smiled and replied, doesn't it mean that you're about to die? Chapter 466. Xiao Hui and the others went to dark mountain silence, a deadly silence. At this moment, absolutely no one could speak because their mouths could fit a large bowl with the way they hung open. No one would have ever thought that Ren Dong, an 8th-tier evolved being and instructor at Cloud Peak Academy, had died like this. Life and death ring, life and death ring. The underworld had a new ghost, and Ren Dong was no longer in the mortal realm. Yet Yi Li's face remained calm and unmoved as if nothing had happened. Yi Li glanced at the people beneath the life and death arena, and after a few seconds he slowly spoke. Although I am a new student at Cloud Peak Academy, I didn't come here to cultivate. One came to see a few people. The tone of Yi Li's voice was filled with spiritual energy, permeating throughout Cloud Peak Academy. The president and vice president were taken aback. This wasn't what they had anticipated. The students were equally surprised. Looking across the entire continent, there were countless people who aspired to enter Cloud Peak Academy. But Yi Li entered Cloud Peak Academy just to meet a few people? She is Xiao Hui, Yun Man, Lu Qian and Su Suner, Yi Li continued. He hadn't seen the 4 girls with his heavenly spirit eyes. This revelation left the students astonished. Xiao Hui? Xiao Hui was the genius of their generation with an S-level genetic talent. Feng Ling looked at Yi Li's figure in the life and death arena in shock. For some reason, her heart unexpectedly started to flutter like a lost deer. If anyone else had said they joined Cloud Peak Academy just to meet a few people, everyone would think they were a fool. But for Yi Li, who casually killed Ren Dong, an 8th-tier evolved being, it was a different story. Of course, they didn't dare to think that Yi Li was a fool. Senior, Xiao Hui and the others have gone to Dark Mountain for training, one student exclaimed. Yi Li realized why he didn't see Xiao Hui and the others. It turned out that they were going to gain experience. This was the first time Yili had heard of the Dark Mountain, but it didn't matter. Finding it was a simple matter for him. Yili opened the point mail and bought an evolved being upgrading elixir, which he then tossed to the student who spoke to him. The student was a second-tier evolved being. He took the medicine that Yili threw over and looked at Yili in confusion. "Senior, what is this?" "This is an upgrading elixir." "What?" The students around him all gasped when they saw the upgrading elixir in the second-tier evolved being's hand. It was a precious elixir and they couldn't understand why Yili had it. The upgrading elixir didn't have any effect on high-level evolved beings, but for low-level evolved beings, its effects were incredibly significant. "Come to the Dark Mountain with me," Yili said coldly to Feng Ling. As soon as he finished speaking, he took Feng Ling's hand and activated the swift steps to leave the Senior Students' Institute. The student who had received the elixir swallowed hard, overwhelmed by disbelief. The surrounding students also expressed their disbelief. The upgrading elixir was too precious, and they couldn't fathom why Yili would give it away so casually. Immediately, the student gritted his teeth and drank the upgrading elixir. Suddenly, his eyes widened because he felt that he was about to make a breakthrough. He hurriedly sat cross-legged on the ground and refined the medicine. In no time he had indeed advanced to a third-tier evolved being. I've become a third-tier evolved being? The student was stuttering. The students around him could swear that this was the most regretful moment of their lives. Chapter 467. Dark Mountain. Yili took Feng Ling's hand and activated the swift steps to leave the Cloud Peak Academy. Yili halted his steps and looked at Feng Ling calmly. "Let go of me." Feng Ling stared at Yili with disgust. Although she had never met anyone like Yili, his strength and genetic talent were far more terrifying than she could have imagined. However, she knew that she hated people like Yili. Yili released Feng Ling's hand and said in a calm tone, "Where is Dark Mountain?" Feng Ling had anticipated that Yili would ask this, and her face twisted into a cold smile. "Why should I tell you?" Yili remained unfazed by her response. "Do you think you have the right not to tell me when you are in front of me?" Feng Ling was shocked. She really was. She never expected someone like Yili to exist. Why did she have to tell him where the Dark Mountain was? "What if I refuse to tell you?" Feng Ling stared at Yili. Yili smiled calmly. "I have 36 ways to make you regret it. Do you believe me?" He had never been a good person, nor did he know how to show mercy to women. He only knew that if Feng Ling didn't tell him what he wanted to know, he would take corresponding measures. Upon hearing this, Feng Ling stared at Yili and couldn't help but think of the scene in the life and death arena just now. She knew that Yili was definitely not lying. Such a person. Feng Ling really couldn't imagine why she could feel the aura of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood on Yili, who looked to be only about 20 years old. Such an aura even made her a little breathless. "Very well. I'll take you there." Feng Ling gritted her teeth and spoke. Yili nodded and then he said, "Give me your hand." Feng Ling knew what Yili meant, and after a few moments of contemplation, she reluctantly placed her hand in his. Yili activated the swift steps. He was literally flying in the air. With the information provided by Feng Ling, Yili already knew the location of Dark Mountain. Dark Mountain wasn't too far from Cloud Peak Academy, and Yili's speed with the swift steps was astonishing. In just a moment he and Feng Ling arrived at the foot of Dark Mountain. Yili gazed at the Dark Mountain, which exuded a weak aura of the Dark Race. There didn't seem to be any powerful Dark Race beings around. "Come out." Yili released the Apocalypse Legion from the system space. They hadn't come out for many days, so it was time for them to get some fresh air. Ada by Wawa Hongye Yutong, Ah Chi Bone Maiden Long Yu Xiaohei and 18 Clawed Zombies. After becoming loath-tier zombies, the eyes of Ada and the others turned black, but their faces still bore some signs of zombification. Feng Ling, who was watching, took a few steps back in terror when she saw the zombies suddenly appear. She stared at the Apocalypse Legion with immense fear. 10 loath-tier zombies? And 7 of them. Feng Ling was horrified beyond words. She had never expected to see such a scene. Could it be? Her horrified gaze turned to Yili, and she had a shocking suspicion. "Never think that one am a member of the Dark Race. Don't try my patience," Yili said slowly. Feng Ling was so shocked that her soul seemed to have left her body. How could he know what she was thinking? "Don't worry. They won't harm you. There's nothing to be afraid of," Yili added casually. Xiao Hui was now a 4th-tier evolved being while Yunman, Susuner, and Lu Qian had reached the 3rd tier. "We're too far from Teacher Lu. She won't make it here in time. We can only fight our way out," Xiao Hui said. At this moment Yi Li, the Apocalypse Legion, and Feng Ling were perched on a tall tree, observing the four women. There was a faint smile on Yi Li's flawless face. Feng Ling glanced at the four girls, then at Yi Li. She had no doubts, Yi Li had come to see them. Suddenly hundreds of wolves pounced on the four girls. The four girls began using their skills to fend off the approaching wolves. Chapter 469. Reunion. After a long separation, the number of vicious wolves was simply overwhelming. Xiao Hui was holding her own, but Yun Man, Su Suner, and Lu Qian, being only third-tier evolved beings, were clearly struggling. Let's break through, Xiao Hui said. The three women nodded in agreement. Shortly after, they prepared to fight their way out. Though their individual levels were not very high, the collective strength of the four women was considerable. Suner, be careful. Xiao Hui shouted. A vicious wolf lunged toward Su Suner at close range. Su Suner, with wide-open eyes, was unable to evade from such a close distance. However, just as the wolf was about to attack, Yi Li raised his finger, and a terrifying golden spiritual light coiled around it. Suddenly the finger fell. A horrifying beam of golden spiritual light flew toward the wolf. Swish! The wolf that was charging at Su Suner was instantly pierced through. What? The four girls were shocked at the same time. Su Suner was trembling all over. She had thought she was doomed, but she couldn't have imagined that she would be saved. Feng Ling understood Yi Li's terrifying abilities well. She knew that nothing Yi Li did now could surprise her. However, when she looked at Yi Li again, she realized that he and the Apocalypse Legion had already disappeared. Heaven and Earth Tao! Xiao He shouted, and then his body rapidly enlarged, reaching a height of 10 meters. He appeared formidable from all angles. Seeing this giant monster, these wolves infected with the zombie virus were terrified. Xiao He directly used his skill, Devour. The wolves successfully became Xiao He's meal. Xiao Hui, Yun Man, Su Suner, and Lu Qian had their eyes wide open in astonishment. They looked at the young man with the flawless face. His handsome, fair face and his clear eyes. Senior, Xiao Hui's voice trembled. More than a year has passed and you've matured, Yi Li smiled and said to Xiao Hui. Hearing this, Xiao Hui couldn't hold herself back and pounced on Yi Li. Senior, I missed you so much. I thought I'd never see you again in this lifetime. Xiao Hui began to cry. Yi Li gently patted Xiao Hui's back. As they say, all meetings in this world were reunions after a long separation. Yun Man, Su Suner, and Lu Qian remained frozen in place. Especially Su Suner and Lu Qian. They could never have imagined that Xiao Hui knew Yi Li. Yi Li looked at the three girls who were still standing there in disbelief and slowly asked, How have you all been? Once they heard this, Yun Man, Su Suner, and Lu Qian snapped back to reality. Senior. Yun Man called out to Yi Li. Although she had been looking forward to meeting Yi Li, now that it had actually happened, she wasn't sure how to face him. Some of the more timid ones were even scared to the point of collapsing on the ground. These were low-tier zombie kings. Teacher Lu, don't worry. Ada and the others won't harm you, Xiao Hui sweetly reassured Lu Yu. Lu Yu was shocked and she looked at the four women. She naturally recognized Feng Ling, although she was unsure why Feng Ling was here. But there was a young man she had never seen before. Alright, you should all return to Cloud Peak Academy for now and I'll come find you later, Yi Li said. Yes, senior, Xiao Hui replied. Lu Yu was stunned. Could it be? She suddenly thought of a shocking possibility, which was that these zombies were all controlled by this young man in front of her. Just as the four girls were preparing to move closer to Lu Yu, a sinister laughter suddenly reached everyone's ears. Giggle, so many humans. It looks like 111 have a feast. As the sound of his voice fell, a shocking golden spirit light flew toward the 8th-tier malevolent spirit. With a wind-breaking sound, the 8th-tier malevolent spirit had already been pierced through by the golden spirit light. Silence, a long silence. Everyone was like statues, including the four girls. An 8th-tier member of the dark race had been killed so easily? They hadn't even had time to see the entire process. It was all too fast. The only thing they saw was that a terrifying golden spirit light had emanated from Yi Li's fingertip and attacked. Golden spirit light. Everyone's eyes widened. They naturally knew what the golden spirit light represented. An SSS-level genetic warrior. Yi Li smiled faintly, thinking that there was nothing worth staying at Cloud Peak Academy for. He decided to roam outdoors and see if he could find the malevolent spirit tribe. If he didn't find it, so be it. But if he did find it, he would eradicate the entire tribe. Chapter 472, Lord-level zombies in Star City. you've become quite powerful, haven't you, senior? Xiao Hui said to Yi Li. Yi Li smiled. You should return to Cloud Peak Academy for now. They'll come find you later. Xiao Hui nodded. All right, senior. Although Lu Yu was a teacher at Cloud Peak Academy, she had never seen anyone like Yi Li before, not even heard of. She couldn't wait to leave Dark Mountain now, and hearing Yi Li's words was a relief. Then Lu Yu led the new students down the mountain. As Feng Ling took her first step, she heard Yi Li's voice. You can't leave. Feng Ling felt as if she had been electrocuted. She turned around and looked at Yi Li. Is there something else? After Yi Li had casually killed the 8th-tier malevolent spirit with a single finger, Feng Ling knew that someone like Yi Li was incredibly cold-hearted and decisive. Besides, he had the Apocalypse Legion. Feng Ling had always thought that the Cloud Peak Academy was a supreme force in this world, but compared to Yi Li, it seemed to be nothing. Feng Ling thought of Xiao He, a tiny dog that had suddenly grown to several yards in size and devoured hundreds of feral wolves. There were no words to describe the shock she felt. Do you hate me? Yi Li looked at Feng Ling with a calm expression. In this parallel world, Yi Li had been through thousands of flowers without a single leaf touching him. No one could hate him when facing him, but this Feng Ling, Yi Li secretly smiled. To be honest, he felt that Feng Ling was quite interesting. Feng Ling didn't expect Yi Li to say such a thing. She didn't know how to answer. That's right. At first, she hated Yi Li because she felt that Yi Li was too arrogant, but now she no longer hated him. It was more accurate to say that she didn't dare to hate him. She was genuinely afraid that Yi Li would use the golden spirit light to pierce her through. Yi Li looked at Feng Ling, who appeared somewhat fearful, and continued, even though you're just a pitiful 7th-tier evolved being, you should know that you need a goal in your life. Your goal should be never to hate me. No one in this world can afford to hate me, Yi Li said. Arrogant, absolutely arrogant. However, Feng Ling couldn't sense any arrogance at this moment. Her heart raced as she stole a glance at Yi Li. Standing there, Yi Li gave her an incredible visual impact, and she couldn't stop her heart from racing. Take me to a place with many zombies, Yi Li said to Feng Ling. Feng Ling was momentarily stunned. A place with many zombies? She didn't understand why Yi Li would want to go to a place with a high concentration of zombies, but she knew she couldn't ask too many questions. If she angered Yi Li and he pierced her with a finger, the consequences would be dire. Chapter 473. Came back empty-handed. Feng Ling was taken aback by Yi Li's words. She would never have thought that Yi Li was actually a low-tier evolved being. This kind of person couldn't possibly exist in this area. The world was vast, and even the Warrior Alliance was not considered significant in this world. However, Yi Li was standing right in front of her, and she couldn't help but believe it. Star City was still some distance away from Dark Mountain. Just as they were approaching Star City, Yi Li suddenly heard the voice of the system in his mind. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a chance to randomly draw a prize. Would you like to use it? Yes. Without any hesitation, Yi Li chose to use the chance. Congratulations to the host for drawing a super treasure map. Would you like to open it? Without further thought, Yi Li activated the super treasure map. Super treasure map activation in progress. 10%, 30%, 60%, 100%. Coordinates, Star City. Yi Li couldn't help but smile when he heard the system's voice. He had said a long time ago that when luck came, it was like chewing gum and couldn't be stopped. Star City had Lord-level zombies, and the treasure from the super treasure map was in Star City. Who else could he talk to about this? Yi Li, we're almost at Star City, Feng Ling pointed ahead with her finger. Yi Li glanced at the city in front of him. The city was almost completely in ruins, which was not surprising, considering that cities occupied by zombies were usually in this state. Let's go, Yi Li said slowly. They proceeded to Star City. As expected, there were many zombies in Star City. Yi Li activated his heavenly spirit eyes and used it to scan the area. However, he didn't detect any Lord-level zombies. Roar! Roar! Suddenly, hundreds of zombies rushed towards them. These were just ordinary zombies and were no match for Yi Li. Using his heavenly spirit eyes to strip them of their combat abilities, he collected these zombies into his system space. Afterwards, Yi Li released the Apocalypse Legion and had them gather the zombies. Currently, Ada by Wawa Hongye Yutong, Ah Chi Bone Maiden, and Long Yu were all low-tier zombie kings. There were also 18 copper armor clawed zombies, all of which were 9th-tier zombies. And Xiao He was a 9th-tier sky-swallowing dog. After the Apocalypse Legion gathered the zombies, Yi Li was ready to go treasure hunting. He had only taken a few steps when he noticed something and turned around. To his surprise, Feng Ling was standing there as if she were petrified. Yi Li shook his head slightly. Anyone who saw her synthesizing zombies would have the same shocked expression as Feng Ling. Let's go. Yi Li said to Feng Ling and started walking. However, when Feng Ling snapped back to reality, Yi Li was already more than 10 steps away from her. She hurried to catch up. But to Yi Li's disappointment, he found nothing. He hadn't found the treasure, nor had he encountered any Lord-level zombies. However, he had managed to synthesize quite a few zombies. Yi Li decided it was time to return to Cloud Peak Academy for now and planned to come back to Star City later. He and Feng Ling then headed back to Cloud Peak Academy. Upon arrival, Yi Li realized that his name had become famous throughout the academy. Everyone knew it. In the life and death arena, he instantly killed Rin Dong. However, Yi Li didn't feel much about it. He was now the #1 genius of Cloud Peak Academy. Chapter 474, I am 22 years old. Even though Yi Li was currently in the Freshman Institute, all the new students had learned the news. Yi Li's face remained unchanged, and to him, being the top talent at Cloud Peak Academy was not important. Hello, are you Yi Li? A man in his 30s walked over, looking very afraid of Yi Li. Yeah, I'm Yi Li, Yi Li nodded. The man swallowed hard before continuing, the president would like to see you. President? Yi Li smiled inwardly, wondering if the president of Cloud Peak Academy wanted to accept him as a disciple. Lead the way, Yi Li said to the man. Immediately, Yi Li and the man headed towards the Senior Students Institute. When they reached the Senior Students Institute, the man brought Yi Li to the door of the president's office. The door wasn't closed, and after the man knocked on it, he said to the president, President, Yi Li is here. Okay, you may leave, the president said. The man then left the area. At this moment, in addition to the president, there were also the vice president and a few instructors of Cloud Peak Academy in the president's office. Yi Li, please come in, the president said to Yi Li. The president's name was Gu Feng, a low-tier evolved being just one step away from a transcender. Above evolved beings were transcenders, and it was said that in this region, only the Warrior Alliance had transcenders. Yi Li entered, curious to know why the president had summoned him. Yi Li, you displayed amazing strength in the life and death arena. Now I would like to take you as my disciple. Will you agree? Gu Feng asked Yi Li. As expected, Gu Feng wanted to take him as his disciple. Gu Feng stared at Yi Li and noticed that Yi Li's face remained very calm. He was so calm that it seemed that nothing could faze him. Forget it, I don't need a master, Yi Li shook his head. The vice president and several 9th-tier instructors were surprised. They couldn't believe that Yi Li had actually refused. You see, the president had never taken a disciple, and even Wang Tian, Cloud Peak Academy's former top talent, had only been the vice president's disciple. I've already said that one came to Cloud Peak Academy not to practice, but to meet a few people, Yi Li continued. Arrogant. A 9th-tier instructor coldly scolded Yi Li. Yi Li, is it that Cloud Peak Academy can't teach you? Another 9th-tier instructor also stood up. Seeing the angry expressions of these instructors, Yi Li couldn't help but smile. You've misunderstood me. I didn't say that Cloud Peak Academy can't teach me, but that there's no one in this world who can teach me, Yi Li said. What a joke. Yi Li, the Demon King, needed someone to teach him. Hearing this, the vice president and several 9th-tier instructors were all furious, looking at the person in front of them who seemed to be. Suddenly, Vice President Xiao He thought of something and he looked Yi Li up and down. Yi Li, your age. Vice President Xiao He was speechless as he couldn't believe that Yi Li was only 16 or 17. As everyone knew, the admission criteria for Cloud Peak Academy was that students couldn't be older than 18. I'm 22 years old, Yi Li answered truthfully. He felt there was nothing to hide. What? This statement shocked President Gu Feng and the others. Yi Li, how did you enter Cloud Peak Academy at the age of 22? Vice President Xiao He stared at Yi Li in disbelief. Chapter 475. This kid is the future protagonist. Even though Yi Li's talent was astonishingly terrifying, Cloud Peak Academy had never encountered such a case. Hearing the stern words from the vice president, Yi Li smiled faintly. It's simple. I just threatened the recruiters of your Cloud Peak Academy. If they don't give me the Cloud Peak token, they will die, Yi Li said nonchalantly, his face still calm. Yi Li, you, Vice President Xiao He stared at Yi Li shocked. President, what should we do? Xiao He looked at Gu Feng. Gu Feng was silent for a few seconds before a somewhat bitter smile appeared on his aging face. I think we should forget it, Gu Feng said. What? Xiao He was stunned, never expecting the president to say such a thing. Now that there's no issue 111 leave, Yili said casually. With that, Yili left the president's office. As he watched Yili's departing figure, Vice President Xiaohe's face turned cold. President, why didn't you punish Yili? Gu Feng shook his head and smiled. This child is destined to be the future protagonist. I'm giving Cloud Peak Academy a way out. Xiaohe was surprised. Isn't that a bit too much? Wait and see, you'll understand later, Gu Feng said. Yili arrived at the playground. Since he was already in the Senior Students' Institute, he decided to visit Xiaohui and the others. The students on the playground scattered when they saw Yili, as if they had seen a ghost. Hey! Yili called out to a student who was a second-tier evolved being. Upon hearing that Yili was calling him, the student turned pale with fear. Senior, is there something you need? When Yili easily killed Rendong, this student witnessed the whole process. Yili could even kill an 8th-tier evolved being, let alone him. Lu, Yili paused for a moment before he continued, where is Lu Ye's class? Take me there. The student didn't dare to refuse and quickly led Yili to Lu Ye's class. Lu Yu was the instructor for Xiaohui and the others, whom Yili had met on Dark Mountain. Sir, this is Instructor Lu Ye's class, the student said, his face filled with fear. Yili nodded. You can go now. The student felt like he had been granted a pardon and quickly left the area. As Yili listened to the sounds from inside, he realized they were having some kind of theoretical class. He didn't think these lessons were particularly useful. Practical combat was the best classroom for genetic warriors. Then he pushed the door open. Lu Yu was startled, her brow furrowed. She turned to look at the entrance. When she saw Yili, her face filled with surprise and fear. It's you? The psychological trauma caused by Yili and the Apocalypse Legion during their encounter on Dark Mountain was unparalleled. They couldn't believe their eyes, they simply couldn't believe it. At this moment, the president, Gu Feng, and the instructors of Yunding Academy had also arrived beside Xiaohe. President Gu Feng was shocked beyond words. He never could have expected such a scene to unfold. Yili, you. Gu Feng couldn't even form a complete sentence. Yili smiled wickedly. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not from the dark race, the trashy race. You can call me the Demon King Yili. The dark race? No. He wanted everyone to know that he, Yili, was not a member of the dark race but was the Demon King Yili. Silence, a deathly silence. Chapter 478. The Zombie Queen. No one in Cloud Peak Academy dared to speak at this moment. Wang Tian was so frightened that he fell limp to the ground. This was the first time he had been so scared. Is there anyone else who wants to question me, Demon King Yili? Is there anyone who still doubts my words? Yili shouted at everyone. The entire academy was paralyzed with fear, cold sweat soaking their bodies. The 4 of them. Yili looked at the 4 girls in front of him. These 4 were none other than Xiaohui, Yunman, Su Suner, and Lu Qian. After Yili's extraordinary strike, Yunman, Su Suner, and Lu Qian had left the classroom and arrived at the playground. The 4 girls were taken aback when they heard Yili's words, knowing that he had more to say. I don't have many people who are important to me, but I consider these 4 to be very important. If anyone dares to harm them, I will kill them. Yili declared, his words filled with dominance. With the dragon-slaying blade in his hand, Yili stood tall and imposing, exuding an aura of indomitable authority. After speaking, Yili slowly walked away with the Apocalypse Legion. Only the teachers and students of the Cloud Peak Academy were left frozen in place with dumbfounded expressions. Not long after Yili and the Apocalypse Legion left, Cloud Peak Academy was in an uproar once more. The news of Demon King Yili, the Apocalypse Legion, and the dragon-slaying blade spread like wildfire. In no time, various surrounding powers and major base cities had heard about Demon King Yili and the Apocalypse Legion but had no knowledge of their current whereabouts. The dragon-slaying blade, as one of the 10 great divine weapons, was coveted by countless people and the dark race. They began searching frantically for Demon King Yili. However, Yili had arrived in Star City. When he and Feng Ling had visited Star City last time, they hadn't encountered any Lord-level zombies. Naturally, he felt dissatisfied. Still, Star City had plenty of zombies, so he decided to make a massive synthesis. Immediately, Yili asked the Apocalypse Legion to gather the zombies. He searched for 10th-tier zombies alone. Furthermore, he believed that Star City held a treasure, as the coordinates from the super treasure map were located here. Yili scanned the surroundings with his heavenly spirit eyes as he walked. Suddenly he spotted a massive castle. Could it be? Yi Li thought of one possibility, that a Lord-level zombie was inside. He activated his swift steps and headed for the castle. When he arrived, he found that the castle was covered in ivy, indicating its age. Yi Li pushed open the castle's doors, and an eerie odor of death wafted out. Who dares to enter? A seductive voice entered Yi Li's ears. Yi Li looked inside the hall and saw a female zombie wearing a red dress. She was elegant, holding a wine glass. This was a Lord-level zombie. A Lord-level zombie was also known as a corpse king. It was the king of zombies. This Lord-level female zombie was the queen of zombies in Star City. What kind of creature are you? The zombie queen seemed surprised. She couldn't identify Yi Li's race from his aura. A demon, Yi Li replied calmly. Demon? The zombie queen had never heard of such a race, but in a world as vast as this one, there were countless races she might not know. She maintained her elegant composure, not showing much surprise. In that case, demon, have you come here to? A sharp look suddenly appeared in the zombie queen's eyes. To seek death? The zombie queen continued. What do you think? Yi Li's face remained devoid of emotion. Chapter 479. Battle against the zombie queen. The zombie queen was taken aback, as she didn't know what kind of species a demon was. She also didn't believe that Yi Li's strength could be all that formidable. Demon, aren't you afraid of death? The zombie queen asked, shocked that Yi Li remained so calm. Yi Li smiled. Do you really think you can kill me? No. I've changed my mind. The zombie queen said as she downed her wine, looking at Yi Li with a sinister smile. I've decided to turn you into a zombie. Yi Li looked at the zombie queen, pondering. Could the treasure of this super treasure map be the zombie queen? If that were the case, he would have to defeat her and then feed her a zombie loyalty pill. Currently, he had 4 low-tier male zombies and 3 low-tier female zombies, in addition to the 18 copper armor-clawed zombies. Yes, that was it. Why not become my zombie instead? Yi Li calmly proposed to the zombie queen. The zombie queen was momentarily shocked. She couldn't believe that Yi Li had uttered such words. Demon, you're committing suicide. Suddenly, the zombie queen lunged at Yi Li. Yi Li smiled faintly. Although the zombie queen was of the same level as him, their strength was worlds apart. Yi Li, aside from being an SSS-level genetic warrior, had also mastered the 5th level of the ancient devil tome. It was akin to peerless cultivation manuals such as inner energy cultivation or dragon elephant wave energy technique in martial arts novels. Facing the charging zombie queen, Yi Li's expression remained unchanged. Boom. With a punch, he sent a forceful blow. Yi Li usually only used the heavenly spirit eyes or the one-yang finger. His fists were also terrifyingly powerful. If the sky had a handle, he could pull the sky down. If the ground had a handle, he could lift the ground up. Such was his terrifying power. The zombie queen saw Yi Li's fist and displayed a trace of disdain on her fair face. Then she raised her own fist and struck back. She knew that Yi Li would be severely injured even if he survived her blow. Her power was immense after all. Yi Li's fist collided with the zombie queen's fist. Suddenly, the zombie queen's face changed because her hand was broken. Without a doubt, not only was the zombie queen's hand broken, but she was also sent flying. After hitting the wall heavily, the zombie queen fell to the ground. Do you agree to be my zombie? Yi Li looked at the zombie queen indifferently. He was an easygoing person and generally tried to earn the respect and loyalty of others. But if someone or something defied him, he would fight until they submitted. You're dreaming. The zombie queen ground her teeth, responding coldly to Yi Li. Yi Li smiled, then raised his palm and a gentle golden light shone towards the zombie queen's arm. The zombie queen was stunned, as she felt her broken arm miraculously healing. What happened? She stared at Yi Li in astonishment. Carry on and show me all your skills, Yi Li said to the zombie queen, hooking his finger provocatively. Seeing such provocative actions, the zombie queen couldn't help but be furious. Yin-Yang Tyrant Fist. She couldn't care less why her broken arm had recovered. She was too angry now. Countless fist shadows shot at Yi Li. At this moment, Yi Li activated the 5th level of the Ancient Devil Tome. The Ancient Devil Tome was very powerful, making Yi Li nearly invincible in the area enveloped by the demonic aura. His attributes would also increase dozens of times. Chapter 480. Master Level Zombie. The zombie queen unleashed her Yin-Yang Tyrant Fist, and countless terrifying punches, radiating both water and fire, struck towards Yi Li wildly. After Yi Li activated the 5th level of the Ancient Devil Tome, his overall attributes had skyrocketed, and his defensive capabilities had reached their peak. He stood still like a rock, letting the terrifying punches of water and fire strike him. How is this possible? The zombie queen's voice nearly trembled as her yin-yang tyrant fist seemed to have no effect whatsoever. She couldn't believe it, she truly couldn't believe that it was real. Yi Li smiled faintly. There is nothing in this world that is impossible. For example, your attacks have no effect on me, whereas my attacks. Before he could finish his sentence, Yi Li activated the swift steps, leaving only an afterimage at his original location. Startled by this scene, the zombie queen frantically searched for Yi Li's figure. But when she saw Yi Li again, he had already appeared right in front of her. Swish! With a shocking golden light attack, a bloody hole appeared in the zombie queen's other arm. Roar! The zombie queen let out a piercing scream, which was truly hair-raising. Yi Li remained calm and looked at the zombie queen. My attacks can make you suffer immensely. Demon, I will never spare you, the zombie queen said, gritting her teeth, glaring at Yi Li. Yi Li smiled. The more one look at you, the cuter you seem. How can someone like you ever change? He then raised his palm, and a gentle golden light shone towards the zombie queen's two arms. Instantly, the zombie queen's broken arm and the one pierced by the one yang finger began to visibly heal. The zombie queen had never witnessed such a phenomenon before, and her eyes widened to their largest in history. 111 Ask again, will you become my zombie? Yi Li looked at the zombie queen calmly. He had always been a person who preferred to make others willingly submit to him. The zombie queen stared intently at Yi Li and said, although you are powerful, you're dreaming if you think he'll submit to you. Yi Li chuckled. Then come with me. After speaking, Yi Li walked away slowly. The zombie queen gazed at Yi Li's retreating figure, and her intuition told her she should follow. After contemplating for a few seconds, she decided to follow him. At this moment, the Apocalypse Legion had gathered numerous zombies, all of which were from Star City. The zombie queen was once again astounded when she saw the Apocalypse Legion. 7 Loath-tier zombies? The zombie queen's voice was trembling, so was her body. She also saw the 18 copper armor-clawed zombies. Each one was a 9-tier zombie. Yi Li paid no attention to the zombie queen's shock and issued orders for the Apocalypse Legion to take action.